Here's some inside information from Betty Crocker. It's the most exciting thing you can do with the inside of a cake. Introducing the Betty Crocker Bacon Fill, a delightful new pan that lets you prepare a cake with all kinds of delicious fillings. Imagine the look on your child's face when you cut into the cake and there's his favorite flavor of ice cream or her favorite gelatin. And who wouldn't enjoy a cake filled with delicious fresh fruit? The secret is these 3 separate sections. Just pour your favorite Betty Crocker cake mix into the main bacon fill pan and lock on this special inner chamber. Now pour more cake mix into this base pan and put them both in to bake. When they're done, remove the insert, add your filling to the center cavity, and cover it with the base. In no time, you'll have the greatest cake you ever made.
Hello and welcome to Happy Baking. This is the first in a brand new series called As Seen on TV, and today I'm going to be taking a stab at the Betty Crocker Bacon Fill Pan. Take a look at it. It's a 3-part cake system, though it does come with a 4th optional piece if you want to make different shapes of cakes. The idea is you bake one kind of standard cake, then the other cake has this insert that basically allows it to have a hollow cavity that you can fill after baking. This pan debuted in 2004, the year before I started pastry school, and I remember the infomercial in vivid detail.
These are the kind of desserts you'll find in the finest restaurants. Ice cream cakes, Italian-filled torts, even baked Alaska.
Last year, a friend of mine sent me this as a birthday gift, and I have been dying to try it out. So today I'm going to make 3 completely different cakes to test the limits of this supposedly magical pan. One of the biggest things the commercial claims is that it makes cakes that are gourmet and restaurant level. And I actually want to try to prove that right and see if we can make some things with this unique pan that are worthy of a bakery case. It could be a disaster, so let's get baking. Let's talk about the why behind this design. This pan attempts to make layer cakes more approachable by baking 2 cakes only. One standard and one with an empty cavity that can be filled. This means you can skip the step of leveling or torting your cake layers and makes it a little bit easier because you don't have to stack multiple layers of cake and filling. If I'm being honest, I tend to think things like this are a bit silly because baking layer cakes is not that hard if you've got the proper instruction and a little know-how. But I won't knock it till I tried it, so let's bake and fill. Have you ever wanted to light a cake on fire?
Even baked Alaska.
One of the main ways the bacon fill pan is advertised is as an easy tool for making ice cream cakes. And ice cream cakes in real life are kind of a hassle because you always have to be running to and from the freezer. So the idea that there's really only one step of adding ice cream seemed appealing to me, possibly as one of the best ways to use this pan. So I decided to make a lemon meringue inspired baked Alaska, since they are only served in the finest of restaurants. First, let's talk about the cake. For the other cakes, I actually just did tweaks on my own recipes, but for this one, I developed a recipe based on the ratio of cake mix. So you'll see that actually the ingredients and everything emulate how you would make a cake mix, plus a few slightly gourmet substitutions and additions. I thought that this would just be a fun way to kind of experiment with what this would be like if you actually made it with 2 boxes of cake mix as the product suggests. To make this cake, we'll start by making a lemon-infused sugar. I'll zest 2 lemons into the sugar for the recipe and use my fingers to rub the 2 together. This extracts some of the essential oils and a ton of flavor out of the zest and transfers it to the sugar. Then when we mix the cake, all that flavor is already trapped inside. If you're ever using a recipe that calls for citrus zest, this is an extra little thing you can do with a huge flavor payoff. Cake mixes are made in a similar fashion to the reverse creaming method, meaning all of the dry ingredients, including the sugar, are mixed together to combine and then the other ingredients are added to it. So we'll mix the flour, some dry milk powder, our flavored sugar, fine sea salt, and baking powder together to combine. Once those are nice and mixed together, I'm going to add the fat. Now, a lot of cake mixes call for oil, and that's just for ease because basically you can stir it together with a spatula or a whisk all in one bowl. But I am gonna use butter because flavor, baby. Once the dry ingredients are nice and combined, we'll add the softened butter to the mixer and mix it with the paddle attachment until the butter is fully incorporated. The reverse creaming method is great because it is known for making an especially tender cake due to this mixing technique. Then we'll just need to add our liquid. We've got some water because we're using dried milk, so we don't necessarily need to use milk. We'll be able to just use water like you would in a cake mix. But I'm gonna augment it with some fresh squeezed lemon juice, and then of course we will need quite a few eggs. In fact, we will need 6. We'll whisk all the wet ingredients together, add them to the mixer, and mix until a smooth batter forms. Now we're ready to bake the cake. Be sure that you grease all parts of the bacon fill pan really well and start by filling the larger cake pan. It has a notch in the side, and that's really what you should use as your fill line. Then you can pour the rest of the batter into the smaller pan and attach the bacon fill insert. I'll bake the cake at 350 degrees until a tester inserted into the center of the smaller cake comes out clean. Then it'll take about 5 to 10 minutes longer for the bigger cake to be finished. And after it comes out, I will remove the bacon fill insert and cool these on a cooling rack. Let the cakes cool for about 5 to 10 minutes in the pan and then invert them onto a cooling rack to cool completely. Okay, I've got my lemon cake. It's been completely cooled and I'm going to fill it with the ice cream now, pop it in the freezer so that it has time to really firm up before I frost it. I'm gonna fill this with some lemon ice cream, and of course you can use homemade, you can use store-bought. It's a little harder to find lemon ice cream at the store, so lemon sorbet is also delicious. Or sherbet would be really good. I've softened this a bit just to make it a little bit easier to pack in. And it's gonna take a little more than a pint to fill this cavity all the way to the top. You can see that it's come over a tiny bit of the bacon fill edge. I'm okay with that because it's also gonna help adhere this bottom cake to it. So what we'll do is we'll invert the cake on the top here and press down a little bit. And then I'll invert the whole thing. I know that seems scary, but actually this thing is a honker. It is like very capable of being moved in this way. Now this is another complaint I have about this pan. You can see it doesn't actually line up. The cake pan is slightly angled. So if you put the side that's slightly smaller towards the cake, it matches up better, but then the base of your cake is wider, which is also more difficult for frosting. I'm planning to just leave it like this because I can fill in that in-between space with meringue and it'll look nice in the end. But that's another problem I've got with this pan. Why wouldn't you make it a straight-sided cake pan? It seems weird. Okay, I'm gonna transfer this to a serving platter, cover it a little bit, and off to the freezer it goes. My cake has been freezing for quite some time, so now let's talk about how we're going to frost and finish our baked Alaska, which of course is with some meringue. I'll start by separating 4 eggs. I just need the whites. I'll save the yolks for another project, and I have a small pot of simmering water going on the stove back there. Swiss meringue is my favorite meringue for topping pies, frosting cakes, because you basically heat the eggs and sugar until the eggs reach a safe temperature, and that way you can just go straight from the mixer bowl to the cake. For that reason, it's really important that our cake is fully ready to go and we make the meringue as close as possible to serving as we can. So I've got my egg whites in there. I'm also going to add my granulated sugar. I've got some cream of tartar, and I have some fine sea salt. I'm just gonna add a pinch. I'm just gonna put this over our double boiler and I'm going to whisk it, and while heating it until it reaches about 160 Fahrenheit or 70 degrees Celsius, that's a nice safe temperature for our eggs. All right, we've got the right temperature, all the sugar's dissolved, the eggs are nice and safe now, so I'm gonna whip it on high speed until it reaches medium stiff peaks. Perfect. We're ready to frost. Okay, so really quick before I frost this cake, I want to show you, obviously, this is still a baking show, which means we have to make swaps. So that other lemon cake that you saw was a little bit darker than this one. It's one of the problems that I have with this pan. It seems to darken, create a really dark crust, more so than a lot of my other cake pans. And this was the only time in all of my using it that it stuck to the bottom of the pan. It's very non-stick, but this time it stuck, and it was kind of a blessing in disguise because it peeled away some of the darker parts of the cake. So I was left with some more of the soft, moist cake parts, which is great. So just pointing it out that we've got some uneven browning. I'm not trying to pull a fast one on you and say that this is the same cake that you saw moments ago. It is a different one. So I've got my meringue. I'm just gonna start by frosting the sides. And again, we've got this kind of situation down here, so I will just use a little extra meringue as needed to cover it up. First, I'm gonna kind of focus on getting just a really smooth all over coating. And then whatever meringue is left, I'll use that to like make it a little bit thicker and swoopier. But to start, I just kind of wanna frost the cake in full, make sure I've got plenty. But I am a certified meringue lover. You can do swoops with any size of spatula, but actually I think the smaller the utensil, the better the swoops in some ways. So I will grab my small offset spatula. Some people swear by using a spoon to create swoops, and it definitely works because the bowl of the spoon does some of that work for you. I just like a spatula because it's what I am always using. So like I said, I got an all even coating, and now with the excess is what I'm gonna swoop. More frosting, more topping means swoopier swoops, because it looks swoopier if you have depth, if you have valleys, nooks and crannies. So I'll just kind of keep applying it. And when you wanna make the swoop, and when you have enough, it's all in the wrist. It's all in the wrist, back and forth, back and forth. So we're just gonna go. And then what even is meringue without toasting it? Really quick, let's talk about directional torching of meringue. When you have these nooks and crannies, if you only torch from one direction, you're only really toasting part of the meringue. And that's okay if that's the desired look, but usually what I do is after I've torched, like you see how I've torched the top, now I'm gonna start rotating it the other way and hold the torch in a slightly different angle. That way some of these parts that are untoasted can get a little toastier. Okay, we've got our beautiful baked Alaska. It's got lemon ice cream inside, lemon cake. I can't wait to dive into this, but what I will say is, I think in the pro column, using the bake and fill pan does help to fill it with ice cream because it gives you like a really nice cavity, and it's kind of helpful that it uses almost exactly a pint of ice cream. I think the downside is that this cake that I specifically formulated to be moist and tender maybe isn't going to be as moist and tender because it got such a dark brown crust on the outside. Also, the meringue hides sort of the unevenness of the pan, but some frostings that'll be a little trickier. So all in all, I think this is a pretty good bake and fill cake. Like they serve in the finest of restaurants. It even comes with this 4th extra cake pan, which I'm not gonna use at all. When I first saw the bake and fill pan, I thought it might be fun to try to make an entremet with it, which is basically a mousse cake. These are the pretty fancy cakes that you often see in bakeries that have thin layers of cake and beautiful fluffy mousse, sometimes a fancy glaze, and they're considered to be quite advanced to make. I have a recipe for an entremet, a strawberries and cream entremet in the Fearless Baker. But they are a little bit tougher. So I liked the idea that the bake and fill pan might make it a little bit easier. So we're going to try to keep it as easy as possible with all of the components of this cake while still making a pretty fancy chocolate caramel mousse cake. For the cake recipe, I decided to adapt slightly one of my favorite chocolate cake recipes, which is my Devil's Food Cake. This is inside the Fearless Baker, my very first book. This is actually the cake that I use for my own birthday cake a lot. I think it'll be perfect for this one. So it starts by blooming some cocoa powder. And what I mean by that is I'm going to heat some water to a boil and pour it over the cocoa powder. This just kind of intensifies the flavor of the cocoa, and you'll see it in a lot of chocolate cake recipes. Sometimes instead of just water, they'll even use coffee, which also can amplify the chocolate notes. I'll whisk the two together to combine, but I'll also add the other liquid for this cake, the milk. So I'll kind of let that boiling water sit with the cocoa for a little bit, then I'll add the milk. It's okay if it's cold from the fridge, and I'll whisk it until it's smooth. We'll set that aside for now and get on to the rest of the cake. This cake is a creaming method cake, so we'll start by creaming the butter and sugar until light and fluffy, about 4 to 5 minutes. Then we'll add the eggs one at a time, scraping well after each addition until the batter is smooth and all those eggs are incorporated. I'll whisk together the dry ingredients until they're well combined, and then I'll basically alternate adding the dry ingredients and that cocoa mixture, just going back and forth, adding about 1/3 of each at a time until the batter is smooth and well combined. So many things. I'll grease all parts of the bacon fill cake pan well. First, I'll fill the larger pan up to the notch line, and then I'll put the rest of the batter into the shorter pan. I'll put in the bacon fill insert, and the cake is ready to be baked. It'll bake at 350 degrees until a toothpick inserted into the center of the smaller cake comes out clean, and about 5 to 10 minutes later, the larger cake will be ready. I'll let the cakes cool for about 5 to 10 minutes in the pan, then I'll invert them onto cooling racks to cool completely. There's 2 fillings for this mousse cake. The first is some dulce de leche. And of course, you can make homemade dulce de leche or you can buy it in a can. This is homemade dulce de leche that we made from sweetened condensed milk, still in the can. So that's what I'm gonna be using today. And then the mousse filling is super, super easy. It's basically just melted chocolate and whipped cream. This is the idea of a simple 2-ingredient style mousse where the aerator is the whipped cream and the base is the melted chocolate. As the chocolate starts to cool down, thanks to the whipped cream, it kind of retains that light, airy texture, and it's really couldn't be easier. It's a perfect, simple filling to keep this overall cake still really easy. I'll start by whipping the cream to soft peaks, and then I will add the melted chocolate. The chocolate still needs to be slightly warm for best results. If the chocolate has cooled off too much, it has a tendency to make little chocolate chips throughout your mousse. Again, not exactly the least delicious option. It's still very tasty, but if you want a really super smooth mousse, use slightly warm chocolate and really nice cold cream. I'm also gonna add a pinch of salt to it just to make sure it has a little bit of seasoning before I put it into the cake. I think I'm actually gonna put a little bit of the caramel around the outside just to help the bottom cake adhere as well. And also so we can get a little more of that caramel flavor because I want to leave a decent amount of room inside the bacon fill spot for all of this mousse. We're pretty much at very, very soft peaks. You can see it's still dripping basically, but it has aerated a little bit. And that's a good time to start adding the chocolate because it still needs to whip to incorporate the chocolate. If we wait too late in the process, it can also kind of make the cream whip too far. Okay, put the other cake on top. Maybe this time should I mess around with putting the... Yeah, I think this time I might try putting the shorter or, the slightly smaller side on the top. And you can see it still leaves kind of a gap there even when you line it up. But again, we can cover that up with some tasty chocolate frosting. All right, I just need to invert this onto a platter. Ooh la la! She's got an ooze of caramel, and we're not mad about it. This is ready to go. You can always refrigerate this for a little while, sort of the same way you do when you assemble a layer cake. But if you're ready to make your frosting, you can go right into it. Otherwise, refrigerate the cake until you're ready to frost because that mousse likes to be kept cold. We're gonna make one of my favorite chocolate frostings to finish this mousse cake. It is sort of a sour cream chocolate frosting, and it's so easy to make, it doesn't require a mixer. First, what I'm going to do is pour some cream into a small pot and bring it to a simmer. Once it simmers, I'll pour it over some bittersweet chocolate and let it melt completely, stirring to help it combine. When you start stirring your ganache, you start in the very center. And at first, it just kind of looks like broken, lumpy chocolate milk. But as you keep stirring, the chocolate will continue to melt and the mixture gets darker and darker. I'll add a few other things into that chocolate mixture, just a little bit of corn syrup, which adds some shine and some stability, and a little bit of butter to boost that creamy flavor. And finally, we'll stir in the sour cream. The sour cream combined with the warm chocolate base will turn into a luscious, silky smooth frosting. And as you continue to stir it, it will continue to firm up even more. So you can stir it for a little while if it still seems too loose to frost, but as soon as it's thick enough, frost your cake right away because it'll get firmer as it sets. We've got our chocolate frosted devil's food filled with dulce de leche and chocolate mousse. It's essentially an entremet, a mousse cake. People might get mad if I call it an entremet because usually an entremet isn't frosted with frosting. But bear with me, there's mousse inside this cake. I baked and filled it. It's maybe not the most perfect chocolate cake I made, but I'm really excited to cut in and see what it looks like sliced. Making an exciting cake has never been easier, and the bacon fill pan is so non-stick. I didn't even wash this. One of the types of cakes that they show in the bacon fill commercial is a cake filled with fresh fruit. And I thought it would be really fun to do a version of strawberry shortcake using the bacon fill pan. So that's what we're going to do today. It starts off with a biscuit cake, actually. And I don't mean a biscuit, which is actually a type of cake. I mean, I'm going to bake my favorite drop biscuit recipe kind of as a cake. And it's actually really, really easy to do. It is perfect for all kinds of things. In fact, in my cookbook, The Fearless Baker, I have something called the Strawberry Not So Shortcake, and it is a layer cake made with biscuit layers, whipped cream, and fresh strawberries. It is delicious. So this is sort of like the bacon fill version of that a little bit, with a few tweaks, of course. First up, we're gonna make the biscuit, and this biscuit is so simple to make. I usually make it in the food processor. I'll combine all of the dry ingredients, the flour, the brown sugar, baking soda, baking powder, and fine sea salt. Give them a pulse until they're well combined. Then I'll add some cubed cold butter to it and pulse that until it is no larger than the size of peas. I mostly want that butter to be incorporated, so I only want really small flecks of butter throughout. Then I'll whisk together the wet ingredients, a couple of eggs, some buttermilk, and some vanilla extract. We'll add that in and pulse it until it forms one uniform batter. I'll grease all the components of the bacon fill pan well with nonstick spray, and I'll start by putting biscuit dough into the larger cake pan up to the notch in the pan. And then I'll put the rest into the smaller pan, pressing it into an even layer in both pans. Then I'll attach the greased bacon fill insert and the cake is ready to bake. It'll bake at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius. You'll start to see browning on the shorter cake. It'll be brown on the edges and a little bit on the surface, and it should spring back slightly when you touch it in the center. Then 5 to 10 minutes after that, the larger pan, the bacon fill pan, should be done too. For the filling for this strawberry shortcake, I really wanted intense strawberry flavor for two reasons. One, we're only gonna be able to fit so many strawberries inside that bacon fill cavity, so I wanna make sure that the strawberries that are in there really pack a punch. I also wanna make sure that their liquid level is controlled, because if we pack raw strawberries in there or if we just saute them, they might be really juicy. And that could end up sogging out the biscuit, make it a little less enjoyable. So I decided to go with roasted strawberries for this. And roasted strawberries are one of my absolute favorite things to make, especially when strawberries are in season, because it dramatically intensifies the flavor of the strawberries themselves. As the strawberries cook, they become sort of jammy all by themselves, just with the addition of some sugar. And I'm also gonna rub some vanilla bean seeds into the sugar just to give it a little extra flavor as it roasts. The strawberries need to be roasted low and slow to achieve this effect, about 275 degrees Fahrenheit or 135 degrees Celsius. If your strawberries are really ripe and juicy, this can take quite a while, 2 to 3 hours. If they're less ripe, they're gonna release less juice and they'll be done a lot faster. Right now, I am cutting up my strawberries. Some of the bigger ones I'm cutting in half, but if they're small, I'm just leaving them whole. And I'm putting them on the baking sheet. I'll pour the vanilla sugar over them and then we'll put them in that low oven. And about halfway through the cooking, this is what they will look like. They will release their juices, the fruit themselves will be softened noticeably, and the fruit will have released a lot of juice. The way that you know it's actually done is the fruit actually turns into this more jammy consistency and the juice looks more like syrup, and there's a lot less of it. So this gives you a good visual. This is perfectly done roasted strawberries. These were also super ripe, so you can see how intensely red they are after roasting. These strawberries were less ripe, so they released less juice overall, but you can still see there's some nice juice there that still needs to get reduced down. And best of all, look how the strawberries have intensified in color. Even the strawberries that were white in the center before are now a beautiful red. Think about how beautiful that's gonna be when we slice into this cake. Roasted strawberries are so delicious. In fact, I like to make a pie using roasted strawberries as the filling. This technique is such a great one to know if you're a baker because you can use it in so many different ways. Even though these strawberries take quite a long time to roast, the good news is you can do it ahead. They'll keep in the fridge for up to 5 days in an airtight container. Now that I've got my roasted strawberries ready, I'll get those in the oven. It's time to make some whipped cream to finish our shortcake. I love to use one of my favorite whipped cream recipes whenever I am doing any kind of assembled cake because it's naturally stabilized thanks to one special ingredient, cream cheese. The cultures in the cream cheese help to naturally thicken the whipped cream and also help to naturally stabilize it. It'll keep in the fridge for up to 3 days. That means, yes, you can make this whipped cream ahead of time, and once you put it on a cake, that cake can be stored for a couple of days too. It's really easy to make, but it does start out a little differently because we'll start by whipping our room temperature cream cheese in our stand mixer fitted with a whip attachment. I'm adding 8 ounces or 226 grams of cream cheese to the bowl of my mixer. And to that, I'll add 76 grams or 2/3 of a cup powdered sugar to the mixer. And I'm gonna whip it on medium speed until the two are combined and the cream cheese is a little bit fluffy, about a minute. The cream cheese is looking pretty good. This helps to dissolve our powdered sugar, and it also helps to break up any clumps in cream cheese, which is prone to being a little lumpy even when it's left at room temperature. Now I'll add a little bit of vanilla with my heart and mix to combine. Now with the mixer running, I'll start adding the cream in a slow, steady stream. It's 470 grams or 2 cups of heavy cream. Once all the cream is incorporated, it's not gonna be thick yet, but I wanna take a second now and scrape down the sides and bottom of the bowl because the cream cheese really likes to collect there and we want it to get all mixed in with that heavy cream. So I'm just scraping really well. Don't be afraid if it looks a little lumpy or scary at this point. It'll be smooth and creamy soon. Once I've given it a good scrape, we'll mix it on medium-high speed until it reaches medium peaks. Look at that. So thick, so creamy. I already know it's gonna be delicious. Let's use it to assemble this cake. So as you can see, this is a bit shorter than the full height of the bacon fill pan. I think if I used a little more biscuit dough, I probably could fit even more strawberries because I'd have a deeper cavity. But at the same time, if I used more, then I'd have a still more biscuit to strawberry ratio in total, I think. So instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use some of the extra to kind of spread a little bit over the biscuit, and it'll help adhere our bottom cake layer to this. Okay, we'll put the bottom cake on, and I'm just gonna invert it onto a serving platter. Now, if you use the bacon fill pan the way it says, you're supposed to just flip the cake out of the pan onto your serving platter once it's assembled. But I don't like the idea of cooling any cake fully in the cake pan, but especially a biscuit layer. It's gonna be really prone to getting gummy, soggy. It'll be really unpleasant. So I like to cool it fully on a cooling rack, which is what I did. Makes it a little scary to do this assembly, but I actually don't think it's any scarier than what they're telling you to do. I think some people get a little freaked out by adding cream cheese to whipped cream, or they think, well, I like that. But it really just makes it extra thick, extra creamy. It adds a delightful level of tang. And since one of the alternatives for making stabilized whipped cream is to use gelatin, I really like having an option that just uses another food item to naturally stabilize it. It is also vegetarian friendly, so bonus. Another advantage of stabilized whipped cream is it doesn't get overworked as easily, so you can take your time frosting your cake, you can add little piping details. I mean, this is a pretty snazzy looking strawberry shortcake. I can't wait to cut into it and see what it looks like on the inside. I mean, anything with roasted strawberries has a positive in my book, so I'll be excited to see how this is in the bacon fill pan. Looks like I forgot to fill. The only cake where you can have a hole in the center if you don't do it right. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Happy Baking, where we tried something a little bit different with our As Seen on TV series. My verdict overall is that this pan works. It's non-stick, it's pretty easy to use, but I think it bakes the cakes a little unevenly, giving kind of a dark outer crust, and I'm not sure that the cake to filling ratio is really my favorite. I think I'm gonna stick with old-fashioned layer cakes, and if you wanna see some videos on how to make those, please let us know in the comments. If you've ever seen a commercial for anything that has to do with baking that you'd like me to try, please let me know in the comments. And until next time, wishing you lots of happy bake filling.